If time travel were real, where would you go? Well, maybe not where would you go, when would you go? Would you go to like some great moments in history and catch like some big, maybe you don't want to go back and see the big moments of history. You want to go back and experience a time that looks great in the past to you. Maybe you want to experience a Friday night in the 50s cruising in cars or in the 80s walking through a mall. Maybe you'd want to go back like I would here on a Sunday morning, go back and hear some of the great preachers, Charles Spurgeon or Martin Luther. Maybe we go all the way in and we go back to a hillside alongside the Sea of Galilee and listen to Jesus deliver the Sermon on the Mount. If we had time travel, if it was real, there are so many places in history that we could go, so many times that we could see. But when I ask the question that's really on my mind is going back to fix our worst. Are there moments in your life that if you could time travel, you'd go back and undo? I think when we hear about time travel, we instantly think about putting ourselves in historical settings. But I think very quickly we'd figure out with a time travel, I can go make broken things fixed. I can go keep myself from making that awful and poor decision. If time travel were real, where would you go? Would you not take that job? Would you not go on that date? Would you not have said that thing to that person that you love that hurt them and wounded them and caused years of heartbreak? Would you not have put yourself in that situation where you compromised your values? Would you not have put yourself in that moment where you wrecked your reputation? If we could time travel back to our past, every single one of us has at least one moment. And if we're honest, it's front and back of several pages. Moments that we wish we could go back and undo. It's nice to think about, isn't it? But here's the reality. Time travel is not real. In particular, traveling to the past. What's done cannot be undone. Time, our lives, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we can't go back to sometime before us to undo the things that we've done. And what's interesting is that as our lives have a beginning and a middle and an end, time itself has a beginning. Time is something that God created. Standing in eternity, God decided to create something from nothing. And when he created space and he created matter, he also created time. And so here we are, beings made of matter, living in this thing called space, swimming through this river called time. And it has a beginning, and it has a middle, and it will have an end. There was an in the beginning to God's story, and there will be an amen that signifies the end of this creation. There'll be a new heaven and a new earth, and we will spend eternity with God if we are part of his family. But right now, we live with a cold, hard reality, and here's what it is: that we are finite beings who can do nothing to slow the march of time. If you figured out how to do it, please, I'll sit down, you come up, tell us how to do it. Because if you could slow the march of time, where we can maybe like have that moment to think a little bit more, that moment to make a better decision, now I can see y'all. Good. I wonder if there's anybody in the room. All I saw was lights. There you are. Good morning. Here's the thing. We are finite. We are created. We are subjected to this thing called time. And as time marches on and on and on with each passing hour and with each passing day, how can we make the most of this finite time that God has given us? Over the last few weeks, and for the next several weeks, we're in a book called Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, tucked in there between Psalms and Proverbs and Isaiah and Jeremiah, this short 12-chapter book called Ecclesiastes. And it's written, we believe, by a man named King Solomon, who is recorded in Scripture as the wisest man who ever lived, who brought his wisdom, having had incredible riches, having had incredible power, having this incredible intellect and wisdom at his disposal. He set out to decide, what can we do in this thing called life that sometimes feels so futile? He begins his ancient TED Talk saying that meaningless, everything is meaningless. And you go, wow, that's an encouraging book. But he is meeting people right in the brokenness of this world to have them look beyond this world and find God. And so as he walks through this struggle of futility that every single one of us feels week in and week out, feeling like The things we fix don't stay fixed. The things we clean don't stay clean. The things we put away don't stay put away. That this world tends toward chaos and futility and frustration. What can we do as created beings to make the most of the time that God has given us? Is Solomon just being this, this world's worst Debbie Downer? I don't think that's what he's doing. He's trying to get people to go, if you're trying to find the solution to the world's problems within this problematic world, it's always going to feel futile and frustrating, and it's going to feel meaningless. But he's calling his people to see. He's calling his audience to see. He calls himself the preacher, and he's speaking to the gathering. He says, you know what? There's something beyond this broken world that can bring meaning to what seems meaningless. So we're going to see that today in the area of time, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And a passage that when we start is going to sound very familiar. Please refrain from singing. Chapter 3, verse 1 says, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." Turn, turn, turn. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you was like, what in the world is he talking about here, right? Well, there's an old song by a band called The Byrds, and the songwriter, quote unquote, of this song was a guy named Pete Seeger. And Pete Seeger and his band, The Byrds, had a song called Turn, 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 and all but 6 words in the song come directly from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It's funny, he actually sends royalties every year to the nation of Israel because he knows he stole the lyrics. I thought that was kind of funny. And when you hear the old, was this 1960s song, when you hear it played out, it plays in a context, like just sort of listening to it, and it feels like the passage, this poem that Solomon has written and the Byrds are singing, right? It feels like it's about, hey, there's bad times in life, but good times are coming. But I'm not sure that's exactly what Solomon is writing about. Is it true? Yeah, most bad times come to an end. There's some good times around the corner. But that's not the promise of what Solomon is wrestling with here. It's not the reality that he's wrestling with here. You have these pairings within these poems, these paired actions, and they seem to cancel each other out. That you have this thing happening and then this thing happening, and you finish the line going, well, didn't this thing just undo that thing? You have these pairings where it seems to cancel it out. And we got to understand that this is not a list that is a prescription, okay? It is a list that is a description. It says there's a time to kill. It's not a license to kill. So it's not saying, hey, there's a time to kill. And you're like, yes, have you met my family? Yes, there's a time to kill. No, that's not what it is. It isn't a license to kill. It is a description of sort of the totality of life in a futile world, the totality of what it's like to have things that don't stay put away, that don't stay clean, that don't stay fixed. And what you end up seeing in this is some of that absurdity, some of that feeling of meaninglessness that every human being is going to experience when living in a fallen world. It's this idea of 14 pluses and 14 minuses leaves us with a net zero. If you read that poem and you stop at that poem, you look at it and you go, what did we accomplish? I picked up, I put down. I healed, I killed. Time for love, time for hate, time for peace. I hope it's not too late, right? 14 pluses, 14 minuses. It ends up with a net zero. Does that mean that's what we should settle for in this life? Does that mean that this life is a net zero life? Well, I don't think we ought to rest in that. I don't think we should accept that. If we're not careful, that's what this life can become. But I believe there's a better solution. I believe, and not only is there a better solution, I believe it's not always the way this life was. Look at verse 9. Verse 9 says, what gain has the worker from his toil? I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he's put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Solomon, right after this poem, goes to a question he's already asked. Okay, first week we talked about what does a man get from all of his toil? A man works, a man slaves, a people pour into trying to get things accomplished, and they don't feel like they get anywhere. It feels like it gets undone. It feels like it ends up being fruitless, ends up being washed away, or you leave it to somebody, and it ends up being taken away. These 14 minuses, these 14 pluses, a plus-minus life ending up with this net zero. I think it is one of the symptoms of living in a fallen world. It's not incorrect to look at the world and have it feel that way when the world is expressing its fallenness, when it's expressing its brokenness. But that's not all that there is. Why do we know that that brokenness should be frustrating? Why do we know that that futility feels wrong? Why do we know that? Well, it's because written somewhere deep down in our hearts is a concept of a world that's better than this one. It's a concept of a creation that is better than what we're experiencing right now. It is us living in a place where the futility and the frustration isn't there. What does Solomon mean by God made all things beautiful in its time? Remember the creation account where it talks about God speaking from nothing there becomes something out of his sheer voice. He brings reality and matter and space and time into existence. When he's done creating, what does he say? He looked at everything he had made and he said it was good. At the end of chapter 1, he actually goes, it's very good. There was a time when the world just worked. There was a time when sin had not broken it. There was a time when everything that looks broken now was once flawlessly beautiful. We get glimpses of it now in this life. You find yourself standing on the beach. Maybe it's not a busy time of year where it didn't take you an hour to get to the beach. It's going to take you an hour to get back. But you're standing out at the beach. You're watching the sunset, and all you can take in your peripheral is that sunset. It's this glimpse of, God, there is unspeakable beauty in your creation. You're standing on the mountains looking over the valleys, and you're seeing the grandeur, the size, the immensity of God's creation. And you look at it and you go, God, I'm breathless before what you have made. We get glimmers of it now. And then you go back inside and you turn on the news and it's gone, right? Because we know that we see beauty within this broken world, but there was a time when everything was flawlessly beautiful. We never saw that world, but our heart longs for that world. It says there, right after he says he made all things beautiful in its time, what does it say? It says that he put eternity into our hearts. It's a really powerful phrase that means a great deal to what we're wrestling with here. That God put into your heart and mine, into part of the human design, wrote on our hearts in a concept of eternity, an understanding that there is more. And there's a lot that comes from that. There's 4 things I want to show you. That our hearts know the world is not right and that something has gone horribly wrong. We've never seen a different world, but we know by looking at this world that something's not quite right and that something has gone horribly wrong. How do we know that? God wrote it on our hearts. Here's the next thing. Our hearts know that we were made for more than a life of futility. If all we experience in this life, day in and day out, is the futility of the struggle, of the frustration of a world that's been cursed by sin. When Adam and Eve broke the world with their sin, everything became hard. Everything became frustrating. Pain in childbirth, toil and struggle to bring forth crops and harvest. All that happened because of sin. We've never lived in a sin-free world, but our hearts know we were made for a different world. Our hearts know that this life is not all that there is. In every culture, through every time, people have looked for something beyond themselves, something that transcends the human experience, something that transcends the frailty of human life. They've landed at very different answers in very different cultures in very different times. But the longing is there in every human heart to know that there's something more than this life. And then there's this, our heart's hope that one day everything will be flawlessly beautiful again. Some people want to work their way toward it. Some people want to vote their way toward it. Some people want to educate their way toward it. Some people want to pay their way toward it. The human heart wants to see a world that's better than the world is today. We're trying a lot of different ways to do it. The human heart wants to find meaning where it feels meaningless, find purpose where it feels purposefulness, so it feels purposeless. Easier for me to say, right? Our hearts know that something's not quite right. Why? Because the one who made our hearts wrote eternity on them so that we know there's something beyond this. Now, I'm not saying everyone believes what we believe. I'm not saying everyone on the planet believes what I'm saying right now. What I'm saying is that I believe that Scripture reveals that the one who made our hearts has written these things on them. And we are trying to solve a lot of problems going anywhere but the source of what we're feeling. Our heart wrestles with the time that we're in, and yet time keeps marching on. How do we bring those two together? Look at verse 12. Verse 12 says, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all of his toils. This is God's gift to man. When Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing better, Solomon is not writing, thus saith the Lord, here's the purpose of your life. Eat, drink, and toil is not the purpose of our lives. You can find purpose in those things, but it's not this exhaustive thing. What Solomon is saying is that from the context of what I'm talking about and who I'm talking to, from the context of life in a broken world to people living in a broken world, here's the best you can offer. I think Solomon knows there's a better answer. He'll get to it at the end of the book. We're going to skip ahead a little bit later on. But at the end of the day, what he's saying is, here's your best option in life in a broken world, to recognize there's something beyond it. Solomon is inviting his audience to look beyond the futility and to fix their eyes on God. You look at a world where time's marching on, where work feels frustrating and futile. What's the solution? What's the answer? You won't find it here. He wants you to look at your work and how frustrating it is, at time, how it marches on, and say, maybe there's something beyond what's broken. Maybe I need to look to God. He calls work a gift. He calls us to see a purpose to work. Sometimes we think work is a punishment. I remember being a kid growing up, and we had like an acre of land in our yard, and the back 2/3 of our land was all woods, and when I'd be in trouble, my dad would find time to cool off without killing me, right, by saying, go outside and do some work. And one of his favorite things to do was go outside and pick up all the sticks in the yard. He wasn't just talking about the grass yard. He's talking about the woods. Like, go out, pick up. You know how many sticks are in the woods? It's all sticks, right? We had these little sweet gum balls. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these before. They fall off trees, little wooden thing. They had little prickly stuff on them, and they would get shoved down into the dirt when everybody stepped on them. Dad would say, grab a bucket, pick up all the sweet gum balls. I know he's inside, like, taking deep breaths so he doesn't end up in prison that day, right? That's what he's doing. But he'd send me out to do what felt like this completely futile work. So growing up as a child, sometimes work feels like a punishment. And you're like, as a child, Kel, sometimes work feels like a punishment as an adult, doesn't it? And yet Solomon says, find pleasure in your work. Is he serious? Has he met your boss? You watch The Office and go, man, Michael Scott's looking pretty good right now, right? You know what my weeks are like, Solomon. You want me to find pleasure in my work? Well, remember, Adam and Eve had fruitful work. Work was not just always a punishment. You know that work preceded sin? That Adam had a job in the garden before sin broke everything? He had a job to tend the garden, to name the animals. Like, we're built for work. Now, it's funny that sin ends up corrupting one of the very things we're built for. We're built to live out working, purposeful lives. And yet sin comes in and makes that feel futile and frustrating. Solomon says, take pleasure in it. Is he serious? Well, let me ask it this way. It's not every moment of our lives, but have you had one of those moments where your work just worked? Where whatever you were trying to do, it came together? Where it came naturally to you, one of those moments where you get to exercise the gifting God has given you, and it comes out of you, not effortlessly, but it flows simply and easily, and the solution is there, and the problem is fixed, and there was nothing, and now there's something, or something was broken, and now it fixed. Have you had those moments, glimmers in your life of where your work, not just talking about your job, talking about where you got to take part in something, and it just worked? I put to you, there's nothing quite like a job well done. I'm not sure if women approach this the exact same way, but as a man, and maybe other men feel this way, maybe women's like, yeah, I'm the exact same way. I've never been a woman, so I can't speak to that. That's more controversial than I thought it would be. When I'm done doing something, it can be the most mundane things. I'd go back and I'd look at what I did. You know what I mean? The car was dirty and now it's clean. I'll walk outside for no reason to look at the clean car. Yesterday, it's a rainy day, so I wasn't going to clean the car. We had this corner of the house where it had just been kind of chaos for a while, and it needed it cleaned up, and it had a lot of chaos there. So I went in there and I cleaned it. It's the last thing I looked at before I went to bed. I turned on the light to look at it this morning before I came to church. You're like, Kel is sad. Yes, Kel is sad. What? No. What's happening there? Here's the reality, is that there's something in us that wants to go, my work made a difference. And it's not about paychecks, and it's not about career advancement. What I'm telling you is that is written far deeper into your heart and mind than any bank account, than any resume, than any business card, because we are built to be a people who are impacting the world around us. And we do that through our work. So how do we find meaning in a world where most often work doesn't just work out, does it? What do? Here's the solution. We need to view work as worship because it frees our efforts from the futility of this life. Sure, our work is limited because we're limited people. We don't have all the answers. We don't have all the skills. And we aren't going to live forever. Our time is limited. Our work will be limited. But you know what? God is not. And so if we can take our work and make that work an act of worship, we free ourselves, not from experiencing the futility, but from being discouraged by the futility. That we do the best we can with what we have and the time we have, and we say, God, I'm doing this because this is what you made me to do, and I offer this work to you as an act of worship. Worship is not just the songs we sing on Sunday morning. It's not just the tithes we give to support God's work. It is not just spending time in God's word or spending time with God's people. I believe everything we do is an act of worship, and that includes our work. Seeing life as worship is the best way to use the time that we've been given. Amen. But at the end of the day, how do we react when the things we work on don't stay fixed, don't stay clean, don't stay put away? Look at verse 14. Solomon says, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear him. That which is already has been, and that which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. What is Solomon saying here? We ever spent the day out at the beach and built a sandcastle with your kids, or maybe spent the day at the beach building a sandcastle for yourself? Whatever you were doing, okay? You're building the sandcastle on the beach, and it's beautiful. You're done. You're like, that was impressive. That was fun. I liked it. Is it going to be there tomorrow? Tide comes in, and the winds blow, and some bratty little kid comes by and knocks down your sandcastle, right? And you can't fight children. You don't want to go to jail, so, right? Our work ends up getting messed up, doesn't it? And as we see our work worn away, as we see the things we fixed end up being broken again, as we do that, how are we supposed to react? It raises big questions in our lives as we watch time marching on and work not always feeling fruitful. We ask things like, where did the time go? We ask things like, well, there's never seems to be enough time in the day to get everything done. Or how can I make the most of my time? Or when will my time come? It's very interesting that the exact same slow march of time elicits different reactions from us at different seasons of lives. When you are a child or a teenager, time can never go fast enough. Christmas is always way too far away. And you can't wait to have time speed up so you can get to those milestones of freedom. You can't wait for time to speed up so you can get your driver's license, where you can get your diploma, where you can move out of the house and live on your own. When you're young, time just will not go fast enough. How many of you sit here going, tomorrow is May 1st? How in the world is tomorrow May 1st? Why? Because I'm not a teenager anymore. And I cannot believe how fast time will go. My mom used to tell me, oh, just wait. She told me at 20 and told me at 30 and told me at 40 and now 50, right? It's like you won't believe how fast time goes. Those of you who have hit a couple of decade milestones, am I right? We're frustrated by how fast time goes. That very quickly, our kids aren't babies anymore. Very quickly, that child who delighted in you now thinks you have no common sense. Very quickly, that child that's growing up in your house and they've been a fixture in every moment of your existence for multiple decades. Kids have always been around. Empty nest years are coming quickly. There's part of you that's excited and part of you that goes, what are we going to do? As time marches on, we feel our bodies get older. It's harder to get out of bed. And what we used to do, and it didn't make us sore at all, we feel it all week. Why? As time marches on. It's never fast enough when we're young, and it's never slow enough as we age. And at the end of the day, we look at our lives as time starts to pick up speed and we start to get slower and slower. We ask questions like, have I done enough? Has my life mattered? As our work fades, what do? Well, you know what? Even the best of people who had the most purposeful and accomplished lives will reach a point where they realize, whatever I've done here is going to fade if it's something that was built for this world. But Solomon points out the thing we cannot miss is that what God does endures forever. Where should we invest our time? Our work fades. God's work endures. Where then should we invest our time? God wrote eternity on our hearts, but we cannot write our own stories on eternity. We will fade away, and yet God's work endures. So we cannot write our own stories, but we can join God in the eternal story that he is already telling. Do we want our lives to be meaningful? Do we want our work to have purpose? Do we want to make the most of the time that God has given us as it slowly marches on? Then I look at my life, and I look at my gifts, and I look at my resources, and I look at my family. I look at everything God has given me, and I say, Lord, let me use it, not here where moth and rust destroy. Lord, let me use it to join the eternal story that you are already telling, to be a part of making you known to my neighbors and the nations, to make my family be a place where God is honored, to have my work be an act of worship to the God who enables me to work. If we look to this world to find solutions, we will never find it. But if we will look beyond this world to the one who made it, we can find purpose and meaning, and we can join the story that he is already telling. In this life, it's not just the good things that fade away from us that we find frustrating. Sometimes in life, too, there's this whole other wrinkle that in the time we're living, we don't just see good things fade away. It feels sometimes like the bad things never go away. Look at verse 16. Where he writes, moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness. And in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. In this broken world, justice and righteousness feels like some moments. Turn on the news, experience life, get a bad report from your doctor, have somebody that you love hurting because of some pain in their life. When that is happening, in those moments, we recognize like these bad things seem to linger around. It feels like instead of justice and righteousness winning in this world, it feels sometimes like wickedness is winning in this world. But here's the problem. Where do we turn? Where is God when it feels like wickedness is winning? Here's our problem. Last night I'm watching the Lightning game, right? Another frustrating, I know, got to have to discourage you guys with another overtime loss in the playoffs, right? We're watching it go down. But if I'm just looking at a moment of a game, I can't decide whether things are going well or going poorly. Why? Well, because I don't know how the game's going to end. It makes no difference what the score is at halftime or what the score is at the end of the second. It makes no difference there, right? What matters in the game is who's winning at the end. When we look at our world, sometimes we see justice and righteousness. It seems like it's losing to wickedness. So here's the problem. We can't see the clock. And if it feels like wickedness is winning, there is still time on the clock. That when the story is done, wickedness will be defeated. That in his time, all things that are unjust, all things that are unrighteous, God will deal with every single bit of it. And until then, we can't see the clock. And we just trust that if we still see wickedness look like it's winning, that the time's not up yet. God will judge in his time. We just got to trust him. So what does God want us to learn by living under this thumb of time? What does he want us to take away from this passage? Look at verse 18. Solomon says, I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beast, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from dust, and to dust all will return. We're all from dust, and to dust will return. God made Adam from the dust of the ground, breathed into him the breath of life, and just as Adam came from dust, will return to dust. One of life's great certainties is that every life will end. I don't say that to be morbid, it's just a reality. Is that while we have breath in our lungs, we recognize that we are finite creatures where there will come a day when we don't. There's a time to be born, and there's a time to die. We live in a world that has both weddings and funerals. There's a time to dance, and there's a time to mourn. And that's the reality we live in. But is that the whole story? Is that all we're supposed to take away from this? I don't believe that it is. Look at verse 21. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? Solomon leaves this topic with this lingering question of who can know what happens after we die. You read through Ecclesiastes sometimes and you go, should this be in the Bible? It doesn't even point to the rest of the things that the Bible points to. Really, throughout this whole thing, Solomon had no knowledge of the coming of Jesus, and really within the book of Ecclesiastes is not pointing to Jesus. He really, in the book of Ecclesiastes, is raising questions that only Jesus can answer. But he leaves you with the questions. Why? Well, I think he's having his audience, his gathering, continue deeper into the topic. He's saying time is not just the only thing. There's a best way to handle time, at least from his perspective, but it's not the end of the matter. But in reality, he's saying we can approach our limited time with a definite hope. But we can only do that if we grasp a few realities. Solomon stopped short of answering all of it, but I believe God's word speaks to this. So I want to share with you three realities and one conclusion as we wrap up this topic. The first reality is this, is that in a world where time marches on slow and steady and we can't control it or slow it down, reality one is God knows the numbers of our days. He knows the numbers of the hairs on our head. He knows the number of our days before any one of them come to be. We can't see the clock of our lives, but God can. Psalm 139 said, your eyes saw my unformed substance, in your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. Reality one, God knows the number of our days, but we don't. So how do we live a life that honors the time God has given us, that uses the gifts he's given us, that lives a life that honors him and brings glory to him like it should? We've got to recognize that our days are limited, that our days are numbered, and only God knows the number of those days. Second reality is this. We need the Lord to teach us to number our days. We always believe there's more time. How many term papers are written at 2 o'clock in the morning on the night before the term paper is due? How many times did it catch you where you didn't have as much time as you thought and you didn't get to turn in the paper, or you only turned in part of it? Remember we said last week, children, well, adults are just big children. We don't have term papers due this week, at least most of us don't. But we all think we've got more time than we do. We need the Lord to teach us to number our days. Psalm 39 says this, O Lord, make me know my end and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am. It's not a morbid reality, it's just reality. That life is limited. So we better approach life making the most of the time. Here's the third reality. We should live every day believing that this is the day we'll see Jesus. Let me ask it to you this way. If the Lord pulled back the veil of eternity and let you in on the things that he knows that you don't, if the Lord pulled back that veil of knowledge and allowed you to know the number of your days, and today was the day you'd see Jesus, would it change the rest of the hours of this day? There's no question that it would. There's absolutely no question that it would. That you probably wouldn't do the exact same things this afternoon that you would on any other afternoon. You'd spend this time somewhat differently. However that would change in your life, we've got to realize every day could be that day. So how do we make the most of this limited time in a world where things are broken, where a world where it can feel futile and frustrating? How can we make the most of the time that God has given us? At the end of the day, we've got to recognize that if we knew that was the day we're going to see Jesus, it would change everything. Look at Hebrews chapter 9. It says, "And just as it is appointed for a man to die once, and after that comes the judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly awaiting him." At the end of the day, Good Life and Guest, I want you to see. We have a subtitle to this series, and I believe it's the heart of everything we're talking about here. That the key to a life of meaning is living with the end in mind. What does that mean? I think anybody can come to that phrase. And without any understanding of sin, without any understanding of redemption, without any understanding of the cross, we can get this is true. That if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to end up in the right place. So if we are living with the end in mind, now filled with the truth of Scripture, with an understanding of who God is and who we are, with an understanding that there's a God and we're not him, with an understanding that we are sinners in need of a Savior, that God made a way where there was no way, by taking his Son and making him become sin on our behalf, having all that to be known means that we live a life of meaning by living with the end in mind. What's the end? Well, it's not one decision. While there is one decision that's very important, it's not just one decision, it's every decision. If we could travel back in time, there's a lot we would undo. There was a lot we would try and fix. But in the perspective of the timeline of the cross, we recognize we don't need to go back and fix those things because Jesus already died to cover them. All those moments that we long to go back and to be able to undo things in our past, we'd hop in our DeLorean and we'd hit 88 miles an hour and we'd go fix everything that we messed up in our past, right? Jesus says, don't worry about it. Come to me, and all that's covered. At the end of the day, we don't have to worry about looking back to what we would change. We live looking forward to who we will see. How do we live a life of meaning and purpose? How do we live a life that lives with the end in mind? Ask yourself this: will my decision in this moment make sense when I see Jesus? We sang it this morning, that there will be a time when we see him. There'll be a time when we see him face to face. And in Scripture it talks about that one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And I don't want to wait until that moment to give Jesus the glory that he deserves, to give him what he deserves. I can do that in this moment right now. And in this moment right now. And in this moment right now. Every decision of every day, looking at it through the lens of, is what I'm about to do, is it going to make sense when I see Jesus? You know that list of things we talked about, the time travel? I'd love to go back and fix those things. Would you have made different decisions in those moments if you were living with the end in mind? You can't fix those past things. Jesus can cover all of them. And you can live from this moment forward, saying, God, in every decision, in every way, with every action and with every attitude, let me live as if this is the day that I'm going to see you face to face. And until that's the case, let me make every decision looking at it through the lens of, is this going to make sense when I finally see Jesus face to face? Pastor Steve Lawson said this: for the believer, our last day will be our best day because it'll be our first day with Jesus. If you're a guest with us this morning, if you're just trying to figure this whole Jesus thing out, I ask you, are you ready for the day when you'll see Jesus? Have you trusted him to cover your sins, to make you right with the God who put breath into your lungs and life into your body? If not, catch me after the service right down here, down at the front. I'd love to have a conversation with you about what it looks like to surrender your life to Christ and to follow him as Lord and Savior. But for Good Life family, those of you who are following Jesus, I ask you, are you living each day with the day you'll see Jesus in mind? Let's pray. God, I thank you for your word and for your love. I thank you for passages that make us confront hard realities. Lord, I pray you'd help us to be a people who don't avoid the bad news, to just cling to the good news, because, Lord, I believe on the other side of the bad news of this life, the good news only looks better. Lord, I thank you for the hope that we have in Christ, that he has come to make a way where there was no way, where we can live a life of purpose and meaning, not about making ourselves great, but living to make his greatness known to our neighbors and to the nations. Lord, let us see every moment of our lives as an opportunity to give you the worship that you deserve. Let us see every decision that we make as an opportunity to live in the light of who Christ is and to have our lives reflect the hope and the love and the grace and the glory of Jesus. Help our lives look like we have been rescued by him and we are living to make the good news known. Lord, let us not waste the time that you have given us. Let us not value the things that this world values. Let us not be just like the world who just goes somewhere different on Sunday mornings. Let us be so distinctly different, living lives marked by purpose, marked by meaning, marked by joy, and marked by love, in such a way that when the world looks at us, they see the hope that they desperately need. Because when the world looks at us, they see Jesus. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.